So this is a bit of a recorded after the fact, so I'm going to go do all my changeover and setup, because I have a completely different setup for recording versus streaming, right? And I noticed my mics are set up wrong. Turns out I recorded the entire SOMA Rumination with music playing in the background, on accident. That wasn't on purpose. It just happened to still be playing, and it happened to be unmuted, and it happened to be processing wrong. So I'm an idiot. On with the rumination. So I'm just going to be nice and upfront with this. If you're expecting anything out of this video, any profound, deep philosophical thoughts, or natures of existentialism, breadth of reality, or anything worth talking about from a game design or a narrative perspective, please stop the video immediately. I got nothing, okay? I just want to be nice and upfront about that. But many people asked me to go ahead and commit to this one, and so commit to this one I shall. Be prepared for a very short video. Let's talk about gameplay. There isn't any. Okay, that's not quite true, but it is also kind of true. The thing is, this might be the most gameplay-absent game we've played this week. We've actually smashed through 5 separate games this week. All of them relatively short, small, either minor indie or AA projects, or little passion projects or whatever, of varying levels of quality and capacity, but all of them have shared a similar thing. They don't really have much on the gameplay axis. The one big exception to that is the video we'll be covering next, the game I just finished, because scheduling. So this one, however, has, I don't want to say it has bad design, but it kind of does, but it mostly has an absence of design. Something they patched in later, gameplay-wise, was a little option to just kind of disable the effect the monsters have on you, so you could just ignore them. This was because of request. I have heard multiple people, personally, who've played this game, who have mentioned how much they wished the monsters just weren't in the game. I informed them that they patched in something to remove them, or at least to remove their significance, and they were like, oh, good, that actually makes the game much better. And that pretty much says all it needs to. If you've listened to anything I've ever talked about ever, you know I'm actually pretty big on game design, and how even a relatively gameless game, like, say, a walking simulator, still has gameplay to it, still has design to it. This game doesn't, other than some very basic puzzle points. The biggest problem that I could enumerate is the big scary sections with the monsters, which is, of course, the primary problem, don't really have anything to them, with one notable exception. You don't really have tools or kit in your arsenal to deal with them, so all you're doing is either waiting or getting lucky. Or just running by them because you can do that 9 times out of 10 and just be fine. They will actively stop from following you at a certain point. Also, in certain sections, they are scripted, so the usual rules don't apply, and they will just keep coming or spawn in front of you or whatever in a way that you can't deal with. So that sucks. So in other words, there's nothing there. By a little bit less than halfway through this game, I was already bored of them to the point of actually rolling my eyes anytime I saw a new enemy encounter. Not the kind of reaction you want from that. That is, admittedly, all I have to say about the gameplay. It is very vacuous. This is a damn shame, because I really was kind of digging most of the narrative side of things. In fact, I would say the narrative only really trips once in the ending. So, the way that this is constructed, I don't know what to say about this. I gotta come up with something, it's my job. The way this is constructed is interesting. So, we follow an unbroken chain of hang on, stop. I know where I'm gonna start. I'm going to give you a spoiler warning, okay? So, spoilers in 3. Okay, it was a sled. So, the first thing I learned about this game was the ending. The big twist ending, which isn't a twist at all. It's only a twist to Simon 3. It's not a twist to us. But it was the first thing I heard about. It was the first thing everyone asked me about. It was the first thing everyone talked about. It's probably one of the most discussed aspects of this game that I've seen, which is funny, considering it's the freaking ending. Now, what's doubly funny is, by sheer virtue of spoiling that, several other aspects of it are spoiled. What I mean by that is, the big spoiler is actually much, much earlier on. Let me go ahead and say that I like the structure of this. If you've heard me talk about this recently, forgive me. But something I've talked about a lot lately is in your narrative timeline where you put the big moment. It could be a twist, a reveal, a development, but it's a big moment. Now, what pisses me off is when fiction tends to shove that right towards the end, the last episode of a season, or the last 5 minutes of an episode, or the last 5 minutes of a movie, or in the ending of a game. This tends to irritate me. Cough, cough, Skyborn. So, there's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to bore you with it. The point is, I don't care for that. There's no time for it to breathe. You can't do anything with it. It's just, hey, guess what? Now, that can work if you very carefully structure the whole rest of the story to be seen from a different lens once that hits. Babylon 5 effect, as I call it. That means that you can then analyze and discuss it because you already did, and when you replay through it, oh. But that's very hard to do, and pretty damned rare. So what usually happens instead is, to be continued, please renew our show, and that's about all you get out of it. What I prefer is you shove it forward. Now, I tend to adhere to the 2/3 rule for that. At about the 2/3 point, you spend the first third establishing, character stuff, world building stuff, rules. Second third building up to the moment hits, and the final third is the follow through, all of the fallout of that particular thing, whether it's rad mutants or aliens from space or whatever, it doesn't matter. So that's the general structure I tend to prefer. This one does something interesting. It shoves it to the first third. The first third of the game is almost all mystery. Very little tension in the strictest sense of the word. Very little traditional horror effects other than a couple of jump scares. Just straight up mystery. And then we go outside, and we're underwater. And it's like, what? And then in very short order, we find out that Catherine is a robot, and so are we. Big spoiler. But you'll notice that's shoved way over here. This is to the game's credit, because then the last 2/3 can do nothing but follow through on this, analyze this, discuss this. Simon himself spends a huge amount of his dialogue discussing this topic. Now, to me, most of his questions are just whatever, because all of his questions have an obvious answer, right? Well, no, that's just because I'm 40 and I've spent years of my life already looking at this. We talked about this recently. I forget what the game was, but there's a game we covered a few weeks ago where it's like, this doesn't have much morphe because I've already been through all this. I think it was Talos Principle specifically. It's like, what is it to be human? What? Who cares? So, we all have our own answers, right? But Simon kind of walks his way through it and comes to a lot of resultants. What I find most interesting is that Catherine is such a perfect foil to Simon here, because she doesn't care. Or rather, she actually does, but she can't process it. So she focuses on something to keep her going forwards. Work. This is her purpose. And it is her purpose that keeps her going, and she focuses on that to the detriment of everything else. It is very rare that she strays outside of her purpose. In fact, it only happens twice. Once in the elevator ride down, and once when she finds out that Catherine 1 was murdered. And yeah, it was a murder. Let's be honest with ourselves. Oh no, I accidentally hit her over the wrench too hard. Give me a frickin' break. Anyways, so, she is entirely focused on that. What's really interesting about this is Simon comes across as a bit slow. I know what you're going to say. Everybody in chat said the same thing. He is literally brain damaged. The original Simon, Simon 1, got the initial scan while brain damaged. So there's probably some issues there, right? Okay. I mean, they even demonstrate this once, where they show an email that he bothered to type up the whole email but forgot to hit send, which is actually a pretty accurate way to demonstrate that kind of, I don't know what to call it, wrongness, incorrectness, like the wiring just isn't quite right. The problem I have with it is they never really earn it other than arguably that one moment, that one thing with that one email in Simon 1. But I'll get to that in a minute because that's a negative and we're not there yet. That's at the ending. We're over back here where Simon is starting to process this. When he first looks down at his hands, he sees what he believes to be human fleshy hands. He is wrong, of course, although also right, because what he's actually looking at is a scuba suit, which has the body of, I forget her name in it, which he is technically inside of, with, a nice little eye vision port microphone setup going for him so he can be a functional robot. Cool. But he's not a robot. He is Simon too. For all intents and purposes, a new sentient sapient being, just in a bit of a Frankenstein body. Cool. Now, what's the significance of this? I bring this up because one of the things, and I don't know the term, please forgive me. I talked about it on stream. One of the things the human mind is really good at, is built to do, is if a huge array of information comes in, bad info, what the brain tends to do is block it completely. Just like that, right? So something that completely challenges your worldview or destroys your thought of sense or self, maybe too much pain comes in, maybe too much light comes in. It's a massive sensory input one way or the other. The brain throws up the wall, and then, this is the really clever part, what it is built to do, designed to do, structured to, whatever. What happens is the brain then slowly lets pieces of this information leak in at a more slow, patterned pace, so you can process it. So the brain can take it at its own pace and not get overwhelmed and overloaded. This is how a lot of people deal with things like trauma and stress, primarily. This is the kind of thing that actually good psychologists will tell you, it's a healthy thing to feel sad, to remember those moments, as long as you're dealing with them in your own way, and it's not going too far, and you don't panic spiral. You let those little tidbits in so you can handle them, you can process them, deal with them, move on. Right? If you pay attention, I know this doesn't apply universally. If you pay attention, this is exactly what happens to Simon in this very game. I'm a human. Okay. Wait, no, I'm a suit. Okay, I'm a suit. That's weird. Oh, okay. I look like a weird robot thing. Okay, I guess I am a robot. Okay. I guess this is how this is now. And he just, inch by inch, he allows in the thoughts and thinks about them and processes them in order to deal with it. You'll notice Catherine never does. In fact, Catherine consistently says, I don't want to think about it. Interesting, isn't it? Because it means he is arguably more psychologically well-adjusted than she is. Now, that's the first thing I wanted to share, because I thought that was actually very well designed. And I think the game does do a good job with that. It does a good job of showing that, and using her as contrast was a great idea. Then, I suppose I could mention how wonderfully Lovecraftian this all is. Oh, not because of the tentacles and the goop. No. This is uncaring horror right here. In fact, it's arguably worse than that because it's benign horror. All of this horribleness is caused by 4 things total, right? A comet, which, duh. Unless it was sent by those stupid bugs from Starship Troopers, I think we could safely say that's not deliberate, so that's off the list. Then we've got Akers, who just loses it. Thanks, Akers. Appreciate it. Then he makes a lot of things worse. Then we got Sarang, who just loses it and comes up with the stupidest goddamn idea I've ever heard in my life. Continuity. I wanted to smack when I first heard that. I'll talk about continuity in a second. So he's an idiot and he makes everything worse. But then we've got the WAU, a program that is just doing what it was told to do, as any program can. Now, I don't want to sound talking downy too, but it was actually specifically requested me to share this little blurb, because we talked about this on stream too. So, on the off chance you've never really thought about it this way, think about it this way. If I tell you, let's just imagine for a moment that you're here. Oh my god, what are you doing in my office? I've got a shark. If I ask you, will you please make dinner? Could you please make dinner? You'd be like, yeah. And you know everything you need to know to do that, because you are a sentient sapient being with years of experience and knowledge and understanding. And at the end of the day, you can always carry takeout, right? What if you tell a program to make dinner? Well, the problem is that is actually much more complex of a command than it sounds like from a programming language perspective. There are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers going down into that. Even if you want to make something as incredibly basic as just scrambled eggs, one of the most basic dishes that exists, that is still something that would take line upon line upon line of code to define the eggs, how to grab an egg, how to procure the egg from the thing, what the carton looks like, what other possible things look like for a carton, how to identify if the carton's empty, if there's no eggs in there, how to deal with the eggshells, what you're doing with, how to open the eggs while we're on the subject, how to get them in the thing, make sure to have the butter there so it doesn't burn the thing, make sure you use the right frying pan, make sure you use, or skillet, excuse me, make sure you set up the oven just the right way, etc., 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 etc. All of this stuff we don't have to think about, because we're not a program. My reason for going into all of this is to talk about the difference between a true sentient sapient being and a bot. So the WAU is a bot. It's a fairly advanced bot. Catherine tries to explain it a few times, but it is still just a program going about its programming and having absolutely no idea how to make dinner. And that's what it does throughout the course of the whole game. Almost all of this horrific, nightmarish, literally fate worse than death garbage happens because of a program doing what it was told to. And there's something wonderfully banal about that. Mundane. Like, that's just a Tuesday, you know? And it's probably my favorite aspect of the horror of this game overall. Although, several people said it on chat, and I agree with this. You know what'd be really horrifying? They finally launched the thing, and they forgot to resume the simulation. God, that would be the worst. I couldn't deal with that. Anyways, so then I suppose... So we've talked about the WAU. I mentioned Sarang and continuity, and I said I'd talk about that too. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. I had a lengthy discussion with Lore Reloaded about this, actually, after Cyberpunk, which tried to discuss this same topic and failed miserably, frankly, as much as I do actually like Cyberpunk narratively, Cyberpunk 2077. I do think it kind of fell apart in several ways, and this is one of them. And I can't seem to find it. I had a prop ready to go. I had a flash drive. There it is. I don't know what's doing over here. I actually broke this stupid flash drive when I was doing this on camera. No joke. Not sure what's up with it now. There we go. Hey, I fixed it. Oh, amazing. I'm so stupid. Okay. Look, I'm a dork. What do you want from me? Let's say for a moment that there's a file on here, okay? Now, if I grab this USB drive and pick it up and drag it over to a new location, this is the original file. It has moved with me. It has transferred. But if I were to... Let's do this without breaking it this time. If I were to plug this into something and copy that file over, then the original file's right here. Hasn't moved. No transfer has happened. I have made a duplicate of the file, right? This is important, because that's exactly what happens in this game, as it should. And it's exactly how it's portrayed. The game actually does a really good job of visually portraying this effect when we see it for ourselves, because again, we play an almost uninterrupted stream of Simon 4 the entire game. No, think about it. Everything we see throughout this game is the memory of Simon 4, specifically. Simon 1 went in for the brain scan, and then, obviously, that scan, that memory was carried forward into Simon 2, who we play through most of the game as. Simon 2 then makes a copy of himself in order to put into the armored suit so we can go down to the depths, leaving us with Simon 3, who of course executes Simon 2, which then leaves us going down to the depths, sending the final copy onto the Ark, and leaving us with Simon 4, the one who ends the game. Now, there's a bit of a niggle with that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the point is, continuity doesn't apply here. Let me rephrase that. Continuity with a capital C. People kept making fun. They're like, Lord, you could finally rave about how much you hate continuity. I'm like, it's the dumbest concept. The idea is that if you were to copy at the moment of forking, that's actually a real term. It's a programming term, and it's a real science fiction term. It's exactly what it looks like. One program, two programs. Boom, there you go. Because at the moment of the fork, they're the same program, right? And the longer they go, the more different they become, and eventually, points if you get it. So, the idea is if you kill yourself the moment of that the forking happens, then you transfer over to digital you, the copy you 2, which is now in the digital space. This is so stupid, I actually can't even explain this without just saying it again. If I plug this USB drive into a program, and copy a file over, and then immediately burn this USB drive, guess what happens to the USB drive? The original file. It's burnt. It's dead. It's gone. That's USB drive file 2 that's in the computer. Right? That is no longer the same thing. Now, in terms of programming in computers, who gives a crap? We don't care about the original files for the most part, unless you're into certain aspects of legality, or criminality, or finance, or occasionally, like, historical stuff. So in general, all you care about is the file the same as the original, in which case the answer is almost always yes. So, who cares? It matters, however, when we get into the science fiction element of presuming that we could store a consciousness, a self, a sentient, sapient being as data. If we're able to do that, then that suddenly matters, because as this very game shows, what happens to the original is the original dies. Simon 1's dead. Simon 2's dead, although you can just sign that one. Curious question, how many of you decided to kill Simon 2? I did without hesitation, because I'm really against fates worse than death. And there's a lot of fates worse than death in this game. Like, I actually ended up euthanizing a lot of people because the fates they were in were much worse than death. And I want you to imagine just waking up, you know, days, hours, weeks later, in that suit, wondering where Catherine is because she's gone, off with Simon 3, in a room that's locked, which has nothing in it and can't do anything, and he's lost the door opener. Yeah, it sounds like a fate worse than death to me. Anyways, so, end of that. That's assuming, by the way, that the WAU doesn't get to him, which it probably could, given enough time and effort, assuming we don't kill it in time with Simon 3. So Simon 3 goes about and does his thing, and everything's cool. Now, I do feel like it's hard to even explain how I feel the outro missteps. Part of the problem is there's no real proper build-up to it. It feels rushed, as many games' outros do. It's like, so first of all, we do the run along the abyss. Pause. That's awesome. It's the best part of the whole game, in my opinion. Audio design, visual design. The closest thing we get to actual gameplay, even though it's just as simple as follow the lights. That was terrifying. Beautifully, wonderfully, horrifying. That was awesome. And then we go through the spider cave. Oh, I know they're crabs, but no, they're spiders. And then it's just, whoa, that whole thing was awesome. That was incredibly well done. But then from that point on, the game just flounders because it doesn't know what it wants to do. So it has kind of a short pseudo-puzzly, not really section. And then we have, well, I hesitate to call it a boss fight. So instead we just have an interaction with the WAU and kill it. And then almost get killed, but then get saved, but then run. And then we have one other little pseudo-puzzle section, and then one last walk out on the catwalks in order to launch the arc, and then we're done. It's weirdly paced, and doesn't feel in any way like an incline or a decline. As I've mentioned before, both work for outros. You can have an increased intensity to the end, or a slow descent of intensity towards the end. This just feels like it's meandering. I use that word a lot. I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that. It feels like it's just... Oh, game over. You win. So I didn't care for that. But I also feel like the game made a misstep. Because what I would have done is I would have completely changed what happened to Catherine 2, or actually 2.5, and Simon 3. So first of all, you know, they successfully launched the arc. I would have had the game immediately shove over to Simon 4, the one on the arc. And hey, we did it! Satellite goes, unfolds, yay! Credits. Then cut down to the fate of Simon 3 and Catherine 2.5. And figure out what the hell's going on with them. Now, let me just say that them arguing until she breaks and him being stuck in a chair until his power runs out, or until he eventually gets crushed by the pressure, is extremely unsatisfying, even from a horror perspective. That's just like, what? Why? Although I should mention that her breaking would have worked if it was not because of her being upset or frustrated, but rather her finally having to face the reality of the fact that she lives inside of a chip, and this is her life now, forever. Finally having the information break through the wall, And unlike Simon, who's been eking it out, it all bursts through in one, and then her circuitry breaks in the process. Just random thoughts. I suppose I could also mention that I would kind of like it if Simon didn't, just have a fate worse than death, but this is a horror game, and I know we're supposed to go for that, so fine, whatever. He gets to spend eternity suffering forever for no good reason. Cool. Overall, this is not a bad narrative. If you ever do pick this game up, if you've somehow gotten to this point and haven't already decided, or played it yourself, I can recommend it. I said it in a review, too. Just play it with safe mode on. Turn the monsters off. They don't add anything. I hope you've enjoyed what absolutely irrelevant and inconsequential thoughts I have on this one. I will see you next time.